Saving money in the bank is the foundation of building wealth and financial security. What if I told you that your savings account is actually making rich people richer while keeping you poor forever? This sounds responsible because we're taught that compound interest builds wealth over time and that prudent people save their money rather than spending it recklessly. But something's wrong when the biggest savers stay broke while the biggest borrowers build empires. Everyone knows you should save money in the bank for emergencies and future goals. You put aside a percentage of each paycheck and watch your balance slowly grow over time. Why do people who save diligently for decades often retire with almost nothing, while people who borrow millions become billionaires? This sounds like wisdom, because we see compound interest calculators showing how small amounts grow over long periods. We're told that patience and discipline with savings will eventually lead to financial freedom. But something doesn't fit when your savings earn 0.5% while your money gets loaned out at 8% to wealthy borrowers. The banking savings deception works by convincing poor people that their role is to provide cheap capital, while wealthy people's role is to use that capital for asset acquisition. While poor people are told to save pennies for compound interest, wealthy people borrow those same pennies at low rates to buy income-generating assets. If this kind of systematic wealth transfer disguised as financial responsibility interests you, subscribe to Prof. Jiang Explained and share this video with someone who's been told they need to save more money. They need to understand how the banking system actually works. The system creates fundamentally different relationships with banks depending on your economic position. When we talk about banking, we mean completely different experiences for different economic classes. For wealthy people, banks are partners in wealth building. They receive investment advice, preferential loan rates, and access to sophisticated financial products that generate returns. For poor people, banks are storage facilities that pay minimal interest. They're encouraged to save small amounts while being charged fees that often exceed the interest earned. Think about the most successful business people you know. How many built their wealth through savings accounts versus how many used borrowed money to acquire assets? This explains something curious about financial advice. The same institutions that pay you 0.5% on savings will charge 8% on loans using your exact same money. The difference isn't about financial literacy or discipline. It creates systematically different outcomes, where savings become a wealth extraction mechanism rather than a wealth building strategy. But here's where it gets interesting. The banking savings deception doesn't just offer poor returns on deposits. It actually prevents poor people from understanding how wealth creation really works. Consider how savings accounts condition people to think about money. You're taught that money grows slowly, steadily, safely through compound interest over very long time periods. This conditioning makes people risk averse. It makes them afraid of debt. It makes them believe that borrowing money is dangerous and irresponsible. Meanwhile, wealthy people understand that the right kind of debt is the fastest path to wealth. They borrow money at low interest rates to buy assets that appreciate or generate income. The psychological conditioning also creates what economists call opportunity cost blindness. Poor people focus on the safety of their savings while ignoring what those savings could accomplish if deployed differently. Banks promote this conditioning because it serves their business model perfectly. They need deposits to fund loans, and they need borrowers who can qualify for large loans. The conditioning also creates what behavioral economists call financial learned helplessness. People become convinced that slow savings growth is the only safe way to build wealth. This learned helplessness prevents people from exploring alternative strategies that might generate higher returns. But the savings deception becomes even more sophisticated when we examine how banks actually use depositor money. Your savings account money doesn't sit in a vault waiting for you. Banks immediately lend it out to other customers at much higher interest rates. This is called fractional reserve banking. Banks only keep a small fraction of deposits in reserve. The rest gets loaned out for profit. The profit margin is enormous. Banks pay depositors 0.5% and charge borrowers 8%. That's a 1,600% markup on the cost of capital. But here's the key point. Banks don't lend equally to everyone. They have lending criteria that systematically favor wealthy borrowers over poor ones. Wealthy borrowers get access to large loans at low interest rates. Poor borrowers get denied for large loans or charged much higher rates. This creates what economists call capital flow asymmetry. Money flows from poor depositors to wealthy borrowers through the banking system. The asymmetry also affects loan purposes. Banks readily approve loans for asset purchases, but restrict loans for consumption or debt consolidation. This loan purpose bias ensures that borrowed money flows toward wealth-building activities rather than immediate consumption. Do you notice how banks advertise high-yield savings accounts to attract deposits while simultaneously marketing investment loans to wealthy clients? The savings deception also exploits what behavioral economists call small number satisfaction. People feel good about earning $50 per year on a $10,000 savings account. They don't calculate that $50 represents a 0.5% return. They don't compare it to inflation, which typically runs 2 to 3% annually. They definitely don't realize that their $10,000 deposit is being loaned out at $800 per year to someone buying investment property. The satisfaction mechanism prevents people from questioning whether savings accounts actually build wealth or just preserve the illusion of progress. The small number focus also creates what psychologists call progress illusion. People feel like they're moving toward financial goals when account balances increase nominally. This progress feeling prevents critical evaluation of whether the strategy actually improves financial position relative to inflation and opportunity costs. Meanwhile, wealthy people never keep large amounts in savings accounts. They understand that savings accounts are wealth destruction vehicles in inflationary environments. They use banks for leverage, not storage. They borrow money to acquire assets that appreciate faster than the interest rate on the loan. Wealthy people also understand velocity of money. They prefer to cycle money through investments quickly rather than letting it sit idle. The velocity difference compounds over time. Fast money movement generates more opportunities than slow money accumulation. But there's something even more insidious about how the banking system affects wealth distribution through savings promotion. Banks actively market savings accounts to poor people, while marketing investment products to wealthy people. Different financial products for different economic classes. Poor people receive advertisements about emergency funds, retirement savings, and compound interest. The message is always about slow, safe, steady growth. Wealthy people receive information about margin loans, asset-backed credit lines, and leverage strategies. The message is about using debt to accelerate wealth building. This marketing segmentation ensures that poor people think like savers, while wealthy people think like investors. The psychological difference is crucial. Savers focus on preservation. Investors focus on multiplication. Savers avoid debt because they see it as dangerous. Investors use debt because they see it as a tool. The banking system reinforces these different mindsets through the products and advice offered to different customer segments. The segmentation also affects financial education content. Poor people receive education about budgeting and saving. Wealthy people receive education about leverage and tax optimization. This educational difference ensures that each group develops skills appropriate to their assigned role in the financial system. Can you think of any wealthy person who built their fortune by putting money in savings accounts rather than using leverage to acquire assets? The system also creates what economists call liquidity preference inversion. Banks convince poor people that liquidity is safety, while teaching wealthy people that liquidity is opportunity cost. Poor people keep money in liquid savings accounts because they're told they need emergency funds and immediate access to cash. Wealthy people keep minimal liquid cash because they understand that liquid money is money that's not working to generate returns. The liquidity preference difference affects investment behavior. Poor people won't tie up money in assets that can't be quickly converted to cash. Wealthy people prefer illiquid assets because they typically offer higher returns than liquid alternatives. This liquidity management difference compounds over time. Poor people sacrifice returns for liquidity. They rarely use. Wealthy people sacrifice liquidity for returns that compound. The liquidity focus also creates what economists call emergency fund inflation. Poor people keep increasing emergency fund targets based on fear rather than mathematical analysis. This emergency fund expansion diverts money from potentially higher return investments into low-yield savings accounts. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the banking savings deception is how it handles the relationship between saving and investing. Banks present saving and investing as completely separate activities. Saving is safe and responsible. Investing is risky and speculative. This separation prevents poor people from understanding that saving without investing is actually the riskiest financial strategy in an inflationary economy. The artificial separation also prevents people from recognizing that the bank is investing their savings for them, just not sharing the returns. When you deposit money in a savings account, you're making an investment in the bank. The bank then makes higher return investments using your money. The bank keeps the investment returns and pays you a small storage fee disguised as interest. Meanwhile, wealthy people bypass this intermediate relationship. They make direct investments and keep all the returns for themselves. The intermediary elimination allows wealthy people to capture full investment returns rather than accepting the small fraction that banks offer depositors. This direct investment approach also provides better tax treatment and more control over investment timing and strategy. The banking system also exploits temporal discounting differences between economic classes to maintain a savings deception. Poor people heavily discount future rewards because they need present financial security. This makes low immediate returns from savings accounts seem attractive. Wealthy people can afford to optimize for future returns because they have present security. This allows them to use debt and leverage for higher long-term gains. The temporal discounting difference affects risk tolerance. Poor people can't afford investments that might lose value in the short term. Wealthy people can absorb short-term losses because they're optimizing for long-term wealth accumulation. The temporal focus also affects investment horizon. Poor people think in terms of immediate needs. Wealthy people think in terms of generational wealth building. This horizon difference leads to fundamentally different financial strategies and outcomes over time. Have you ever noticed how financial advisors tell poor people to build emergency funds before investing, while telling wealthy people to leverage their assets for additional investments? The system also creates what sociologists call financial role specialization. Poor people are trained to be capital providers. Wealthy people are trained to be capital users. This role specialization appears natural, but actually serves banking interests. Banks need deposits from many small savers to fund loans to fewer large borrowers. The specialization also affects financial education. Poor people learn about saving, budgeting, and debt avoidance. Wealthy people learn about leverage, tax optimization, and asset acquisition. The educational difference ensures that each group develops skills appropriate to their assigned role in the financial system. The role specialization also creates what economists call financial cognitive capture. People internalize their assigned role and resist strategies that conflict with it. Poor people reject leverage strategies because they've been conditioned to see debt as dangerous rather than as a wealth-building tool. But there's yet another dimension that makes the banking savings deception particularly effective at maintaining wealth concentration. The system creates what economists call return rate arbitrage. Banks profit from the difference between what they pay depositors and what they charge borrowers. This arbitrage is most profitable when depositors accept low returns and borrowers can pay higher rates. The system optimizes for this spread. Poor depositors are conditioned to accept low returns through safety messaging. Wealthy borrowers can afford higher rates because their investments generate even higher returns. The arbitrage structure ensures that banks make maximum profit while depositors receive minimum compensation for providing capital. The arbitrage also creates incentive alignment between banks and wealthy borrowers. Both benefit from high return investments funded by low-cost deposits. This alignment ensures that banking policies favor asset acquisition strategies over savings accumulation strategies. Consider how the banking savings deception handles the relationship between individual financial decisions and systemic wealth distribution. Every dollar that goes into a savings account becomes available for banks to lend to asset purchasers at higher rates. This creates a direct transfer mechanism from small savers to large asset buyers through the banking system. The transfer appears voluntary because people choose to save, but the choice is made within a system that presents saving as the only responsible financial behavior for regular people. The systemic effect is that poor people's savings fund wealthy people's asset purchases, which increases wealth concentration over time. The transfer mechanism also operates through what economists call capital aggregation. Banks collect small deposits and package them into large loans. This aggregation allows wealthy borrowers to access capital amounts that would be impossible to obtain from individual savers directly. The banking system also creates what behavioral economists call financial Stockholm syndrome. People develop positive feelings toward institutions that systematically disadvantage them. Poor people trust banks because banks are presented as safe, stable, regulated institutions that protect savings. This trust prevents people from recognizing that banks profit by paying depositors less than their money could earn in alternative investments. The trust also prevents people from questioning why the same institution that pays them 0.5% charges them 20% on credit cards. The trust relationship also creates what sociologists call institutional loyalty. People continue using banks even when they understand the unfavorable economics. This loyalty stems from familiarity, convenience, and social normalization rather than financial benefit. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the banking savings deception is how it convinces people that the safest financial strategy is actually the most dangerous. In inflationary environments, keeping money in savings accounts guarantees loss of purchasing power over time. But this guaranteed loss is presented as safety because the nominal account balance doesn't decrease. Meanwhile, strategies that could protect against inflation are presented as risky because they involve price volatility. This risk perception inversion ensures that poor people choose guaranteed wealth destruction over potential wealth building. The inversion also affects how people evaluate financial success. While steady account balance growth feels safer than fluctuating investment returns, even when the latter produces higher long-term wealth. This psychological bias towards stability over growth perpetuates the savings trap across generations. The banking savings deception ultimately works because it offers the psychological satisfaction of financial responsibility while systematically transferring wealth from savers to borrowers. Understanding this mechanism doesn't necessarily mean avoiding banks entirely. Rather, it suggests learning to use banks the way wealthy people do, as tools for leverage rather than storage. The deception continues because it serves essential banking functions while appearing to provide helpful guidance about responsible money management. Understanding how the banking system actually works reveals that building wealth might require thinking like a borrower rather than a saver, using debt strategically rather than avoiding it completely. The banking savings deception demonstrates how financial systems can maintain inequality by teaching different money management strategies to different economic classes while presenting these differences as personal financial wisdom. This pattern reveals how modern financial systems have developed increasingly sophisticated methods for extracting value from small savers while concentrating that value among large asset holders. The sophistication operates through what economists call financial engineering camouflage. Complex terminology and regulatory frameworks disguise simple wealth transfer mechanisms as prudent financial management. This camouflage prevents most people from recognizing that the banking system primarily serves as a wealth concentration device rather than a wealth-building platform for regular savers. The mechanism also operates through what sociologists call class-based financial socialization. Different economic classes receive different messages about appropriate financial behavior from childhood. Poor children are taught to save money in piggy banks. Wealthy children are taught to invest in assets. These early lessons shape lifelong financial behavior patterns. The socialization difference ensures that each generation reproduces the same financial relationships that maintain wealth concentration across time. The banking savings deception also creates what behavioral economists call cognitive dissonance suppression. People will avoid questioning advice that conflicts with their deeply held beliefs about financial responsibility. This suppression mechanism prevents critical analysis of whether saving strategies actually serve the saver's interests or primarily benefit the banking system. The suppression works because questioning savings advice feels like questioning fundamental values about responsibility, prudence, and delayed gratification that form core parts of personal identity. Understanding these mechanisms reveals why traditional savings advice serves banking interests rather than saver interests, and why building genuine wealth might require adopting strategies typically reserved for wealthy bank customers. The pattern demonstrates how financial systems can maintain inequality through cultural narratives about responsibility that actually ensure responsible behavior produces disadvantageous financial outcomes for those who practice it most diligently. This systematic inversion of responsibility and reward reveals why financial education that appears helpful often functions as a control mechanism that prevents rather than enables genuine wealth building for ordinary people. The banking savings deception represents one of the most successful examples of how economic systems can use moral frameworks about prudence and responsibility to ensure that prudent and responsible behavior systematically disadvantages those who practice it. This mechanism demonstrates how modern societies have developed increasingly sophisticated methods for maintaining wealth concentration while preserving broad social support for the very policies that create and maintain economic inequality. The pattern reveals that financial systems can successfully maintain public legitimacy while serving elite interests by framing wealth extraction as moral education about financial responsibility and prudent behavior. This sophisticated approach ensures that people voluntarily participate in systems that systematically disadvantage them while believing they are making wise and responsible financial decisions. Hit subscribe if you want more analysis of how financial advice that appears to promote responsibility actually ensures that responsible people stay poor, and share this with someone who's been told they need to save more money in their bank account.